In this tutorial, we're going to go over how to make a mixed mode operation building in EnergyPlus. And a mixed mode operation building is one that uses heating and cooling systems sometimes and uses natural ventilation sometimes. Traditionally, this is done to extend the periods when you can use natural ventilation and only rely on heating and cooling when the building envelope can't provide comfort given the climate and internal loads. So this tutorial is going to go through that. You'll probably have noticed in your previous work on the sensitivity analysis and developing a baseline model for your building that it's relatively sensitive to ventilation. And so as a first step, I want you all to take a careful look at ventilation before we get too much further into trying to optimize the envelope. I've got here my baseline building for Worcester 214, and I've renamed it 20-baseline 01. This is because the baseline is going to change, and you'll be able to change the baseline throughout the semester as you learn more about the building and update it to better approximate reality. So I've also used this number 20 as a new starting point for this set of runs, so I don't confuse it with the earlier runs I did that started at 0, 0. So this baseline 1 is the same model that we all looked at last time for Worcester 214, and I'm going to just run this. Well, actually, I'm not going to run this. I'm going to run this without an HVAC system. Actually, you know what? I'm going to run it first with the HVAC system and then without. So I'm going to change this, save this file as 21 no HVAC. And to get rid of the HVAC system, you merely just need to delete the HVAC objects. When you do this, make sure you don't delete other things by mistake. So there's only two objects here. There's this object, the thermostat, which I'm going to delete, and now there's also the HVAC template ideal load system, and I'm going to delete this as well. And that's it. I'm going to save this and run both the baseline and the no HVAC, and we'll come back when this is done simulating. Okay, so we're done simulating, and now I need to copy the variables file into my dashboard. And I should point out that for this set of exercises, I've actually developed a revised version of the dashboard that has a few new graphs in it, and I'll explain those graphs here. But I've already pasted the variables from the base file, and if we go to the year, you can see that this file is using a lot of cooling and a little bit of heating. By the way, I modeled this in Tampa, Florida to simulate a more hot, humid climate than Oakland, so you can get a sense of this a little bit better. This is a better illustration. And these graphs here, I'm going to just focus on the left for a second, show this is heating and cooling use. This is the lighting energy, and you can actually see the daylighting going on here. See at this edge and this edge, it's using more energy in the morning before sunrise and after sunset. And then equipment use, you can see the summer vacation going on here. The ventilation fan energy is all static. It's exactly the same all the time because I've just got the ventilation fan for occupancy and area that's always on. And then process loads, which is really using the equipment schedule. So it looks like that, but it's got a whole lot less power, so the dots are smaller. And finally hot water, which is consistent all year. I don't have a separate schedule for this that minimizes the summer use. Now for any of these, if you want to change the bubble size, you can use these controls on the left. And so for instance, I've got very big cooling bubbles here. And so if I want to reduce it, I actually have to reduce the size. I need to make a larger value. So I'm going to just add a 0, and you'll see they all get a little smaller. Now I can see individual ones a little better. And it takes a little bit of fine-tuning to get it to where it's a good size. I try and make it as big as possible so that I can still see where I can still see what's going on. So maybe something like that. Now keep in mind this is set to 300,000 and this is only set to 40,000. If I set this to 300,000, then these are going to get pretty tiny because now this is set to display the same amount of relative energy. You can see that the heating and cooling are using a lot more energy than the lighting is. But I also can't really see the lighting very well here. And as I get to the ones that use almost no energy, like ventilation or process loads, there's nothing to see anymore. So I like to keep these at a different scale and something I can see a little bit better, like something like that, or even a little bit smaller there. And right now, all of these, the lighting, equipment, ventilation, and process loads and hot water are all keyed to the same cell. So when I change the lighting energy, the equipment size also changes along with it. You can see that references that. But you can override that just by entering a different number. And so if I wanted the equipment to be a little bit smaller or larger, I could customize that. Okay, so you can see that in the baseline building, the heating and cooling systems are using a lot of energy. And actually while I've got this, on the right-hand side, you can see indoor and outdoor temperature against the adaptive comfort zone. So the black lines here are the adaptive comfort zone, and the blue line is the indoor temperature, or zone operative temperature. And the gray line is the outdoor temperature. So you can kind of see what it's doing, and you can see, particularly pay attention here, the cooling system is working. It's maintaining temperatures inside that comfort zone. Actually, technically speaking, it's maintaining temperatures at the thermostat set points. And you can kind of see here, if I zoom in maybe a little bit more, you can see the difference between a weekday and a weekend. Looks like there's a setback going on here, and there's even a day and night setback going on here. Same thing's going on in the wintertime, where you see sometimes these temperatures dip down. These are probably on weekends or night times when no one is there, and then during the daytime it comes back up. Keep in mind that this comfort zone doesn't necessarily follow the thermostat. So the thermostat is set point. I think it's something like 22 or 21 degrees Celsius for heating and 26 or so for cooling. But the adaptive comfort zone is actually larger than that. So it's important to note here that in a building with HVAC systems, the adaptive comfort zone is not considered a valid comfort zone because we're used to air conditioning or heating. That's not the expectation, is to have these larger bands, and it's not necessarily a naturally ventilated building. We'll get to this in a second, what happens when you do have a naturally ventilated building. Now, thermal autonomy, this is the next one down, is a metric that I've kind of invented that is a measure of how autonomous the building is. This is meant to be run in, you can see here, an unconditioned zone. So here with a conditioned zone, it's primarily a white graph, meaning that almost all the hours are within this comfort zone. There are a few hours like these two right here, or three, that are a little bit above, and these guys over here that are a little above, and that's why actually you're seeing this little yellow streak there and the yellow streak there. And those are probably weekends or nighttime setback, probably weekend, where the cooling system isn't on. And the same with the heating here. You can see it gets quite cold, but that's because of the setback. So this essentially has very little meaning when you've got the HVAC system on. Let's see what happens when we input with the HVAC system off. Actually, let's just look at this one. I'm going to paste in my no HVAC system variables. And then go to the Year tab. Now it looks a whole lot different. So I've eliminated my heating and cooling, and now I can see that much of the time we're experiencing overheating. We're experiencing very little underheating, and you can see the statistical breakdown here that 1.2% of the year is above 8 degrees above comfort. And remember that comfort is a moving target here because it's adaptive comfort. In fact, I'll go up here. Now you can see relative to the comfort zone that the indoor temperatures are by and large above the comfort zone without a cooling system on. Sometimes they're below, and that mimics what's going on here. Now, if we go back over to the energy use, you'll see that the heating and cooling has gone away, right? Our heating and cooling is 0 because there's no heating and cooling system. The lighting is still working, the equipment is still working, etc., etc. So I hope that distinction is clear. It's sometimes confusing for a lot of people that why these graphs are here relative to the different uses. So what I'd like you to do is, as a first step, depending on how you modeled your baseline building, there may be some further changes that I'd like you to do for this exercise. You'll notice that in mine I have, well, it's probably easiest to look at my IDF file. So here, let's go to my IDF file, and I'm going to collapse the list using Control L, and then go down to the ventilation design flow rate class. And you'll see that right now I've got the fresh air ventilation on, the fresh air ventilation by area on, and I've got this exhaust ventilation off. And then if I go down to the next class, I've also got, I've actually got my cross ventilation on for 2 objects. So for this next study, I'd like you to save this file. I'm going to save this as 22 no HVAC, no ventilation. And I'm going to turn off my ventilation, my cross ventilation. I'm also going to make sure that this exhaust ventilation is off, which it is. I'm going to leave on these fresh air ventilation because they're small and they're required by code. So I'm just going to save that file now and run it. Whoops, I probably should change the file to there and run it. And I've got this simulation. I'm going to open the variables and copy them into my file. The point of this exercise is to see when there might be times when it's just changed a little bit. Some temperatures went up, but for the most part I'm experiencing a lot of overheating here. And the point of this exercise is to see when I might have the possibility of natural ventilation and when either temperatures or humidity levels are likely to be too high. So this is just the first step. This is an unrealistic run because I've really minimized or basically eliminated most of the ventilation through the zone, and I've created kind of a greenhouse in the process. But this graph here shows humidity when overheating, and what it means is that it's reporting every time, every hour of the year, when you're getting yellow above comfort in this graph. It's reporting it here. And the size of the dot is the degree of overheating that you're getting. The color of the dot is the outside humidity level. So when you have very, very high humidity and high temperature, you can experience discomfort as well. And so what I'd like you to do is identify the times when you have high humidity and high temperature together, and create a little map or a schedule that shows when those times could be problematic. The best way to do this is to output these graphs, and I'm going to do that by printing them to PDF. I'm going to print the active sheets. Like so. And these will take a little while to output depending on your computer speed. I'm just going to save this PDF to the desktop right now. And that PDF will be about 9 pages. Well, it should be exactly 9 pages. Because what it's doing is outputting the entire, all the graphs on that page. So you see heating and cooling, lighting, equipment, fan, process, hot water. We're not worried about any of these. Then it's got a few blank pages. And then, now these are the ones that we want: thermal autonomy, humidity, airflow. And I'd like you to, probably the easiest way to do this is to save these as, or export to image. And then it will automatically export all of the images on the page. So I'm going to drop the thermal autonomy and humidity graphs in. I'm going to select them both and press Control G, and this way they're grouped together, and using Control Shift I can proportionally scale them together. And now Control Shift G will ungroup them. I can move one underneath the other and align them, and now they're perfectly aligned. And now I want to crop so I just have the important information, these two graphs here, and I can now scale them to the space. I might crop this a little bit more. Okay, so the important thing then, use overprint preview here, the important thing is to annotate when you have high humidity, and so ventilation probably isn't a great idea. And I'm going to use a new layer. I'm going to rename this Notes, and I'm going to outline for myself using the rectangle tool when that occurs. Now the most of that overheating is happening in this zone here, and this is when probably the most of my natural ventilation would be desirable if it wasn't too humid. I'm going to make this a curved, rounded, and I'm going to make this dashed. And I want to also look at the, I'm going to press Alt while moving it to copy that. And if I look at this, a similar area here, what I see is that there's probably an area here from March to June that is lower humidity here, and then an area here from September to November that is lower humidity. Whoops, I meant to copy that and I didn't. This time right in here. Now there is some high humidity there, and there's actually some lower humidity here, but I don't want to create a schedule that's too complex here. So what this is showing is that the blue is the sort of darker blue is between 70 and 80% relative humidity. That can be still pretty humid. The purple is above 80% humidity, which is going to be real humid. And you might also keep in mind that, as you know, at night when the sun goes down, temperatures generally cool off, but the humidity ratio increases because the cold air can hold less humidity. And so this will show very high humidity levels in the nighttime, usually. And but that can be a little bit of a red herring because those can still be sometimes comfortable times. So like if the temperature outside is 18 degrees or 15 degrees and 80% humidity, it can still be comfortable and a good time to open windows to ventilate. In this case, I'm going to leave these two periods here and then notate what they are. So this is about 8 o'clock to, let's say, 6 o'clock. I should write this down so I don't forget it. 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. from March 15th to, let's say, May 15th. And you can make this approximate. It's okay if it's not completely aligned with it. And then the other period I see here is from September to mid-October, from, say, the same, generally speaking, the same times of day, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. from September 1st to October 15th. So that's step one in the process. The next step is to schedule these times for your natural ventilation to occur, because that's when you'd want them. So I'm going to go back to EP Launch. I'm going to select that no HVAC, no vent, and then I'm going to open an IDF editor and save it as 23, no HVAC, no HVAC, 5 air change per hour vent. So we're going to change this from no ventilation to 5 air changes per hour. And the purpose of this is that a very controlled natural ventilation will be about 5 air changes per hour. If it's uncontrolled, in other words, you open a window really, or door open really wide, it can get into 80, 90, 100 air changes per hour. And sometimes using this program, or any program for that matter, that can actually cool off the zone too quickly, and in a split second you go from being overheated to being underheated, and then the heating turns on. So you can get really high heating loads because of too much natural ventilation. So in this first run, I'd like you to go to the ventilation object, the design flow rate object, and now we're going to use this exhaust ventilation, and we're going to turn this on. And this is an exhaust ventilation fan, so it's a controlled 5 air changes per hour. We're not going to worry about the fan energy use at this point. And you want to set the minimum indoor temperature to be something reasonable for that climate. 23 degrees is probably okay for Miami. It could even be lower than that, I suppose. Maybe 22 or 21 would still be okay. I'm going to go with 21 for this. The maximum indoor temperature, again, I think for Miami, I'm going to jack this way up to 40 degrees Celsius. So I make sure that fan is always on. And then the minimum outdoor temperature, I'm going to keep at 15 degrees. The delta temperature at 1 degree. Okay, so I'm going to save this and run it. So it's done simulating. I pasted the variables into my dashboard, and now you can see that the number of hours of overheating has been dramatically reduced because we've got a lot more air moving through the zone. It's not a closed up greenhouse anymore. It's a little bit better ventilated with those 5 air changes per hour. And actually, if you go down to this next graph down here, this airflow describes when that fan is running. You can see that we're getting as high as 5.8 air changes per hour because we've got 5 air changes per hour plus infiltration plus the fresh air. And a baseline, the minimum when it's white is at 0.6. That just represents the infiltration plus fresh air, and that's these times in here. Now notice also that it's doing a good job of ventilating, or there's a lot of ventilation going on in the morning and in the nighttime, and not so much in the midday. That's probably, I'm guessing, because the outdoor temperatures are higher than the indoor temperatures. And so so you can start to see that probably in this graph, although it's a little hard to see because this is showing the whole year. For instance, right in this area here, you can see that that gray line is going above the blue line. Let's look at that week. That looks like it's about the first week in August. So if we go to the week tab here and type in August 1st, then this graph here is going to show you the black line is the outdoor temperature, the pink line is the air temperature, that's called the zone air temperature there, and the purple line is the operative temperature, so that includes the surfaces around it. You can see that the surfaces are staying a little bit cooler and a little bit warmer, the operative temperature, sorry, are staying a little bit cooler and a little bit warmer than the mean air temperature. But you should also know that the thermostat is just looking at the air temperature. So the heating and cooling would theoretically turn on whenever the air temperature gets to that set point. Right now we've got no heating or cooling system, so there is no heating or cooling system turning on. It's just the free-running building. And you can see that there are in fact some areas, some times of day, almost every day, when the outdoor temperature is above the indoor temperature, and so theoretically ventilation shouldn't be turning on. We can check this over here on the right. You see that there's a diagram of ventilation against wind speed and humidity, and this gray line here is the ventilation. And you can see that ventilation is by and large coming on at night and then dipping way down during the day. And so yeah, whenever in the midday period, you can see that that ventilation is turning off. Importantly, here on August 2nd, it looks like the ventilation just turns off for 1 hour, and the rest of the time it looks like it's on. And so if we go to August 2nd here, you can see that it's not as hot a day, and because the indoor temperatures are always higher than the outdoor temperature, it's always beneficial to get that ventilation in, and I think that that's probably what's happening. And notice that the absolute value here, these temperatures are still quite warm. We're in the 30 degrees Celsius range, so you'd probably want cooling anyway, but this is just kind of a window into what happens in this completely naturally ventilated building. So let's output these graphs, file, print, as we did before. I'm going to print these and then save the images as PNGs, and I'll come back when this is done. So those images are now exported and I can drop them into InDesign. I'll give you a little tip here about doing this quickly. I've got a page that we developed before, and I'm going to copy that page or duplicate the spread like so. Oh, actually I think I already did this one, so I'm going to drop that in the trash. But now I've got 2 spreads that are identical, and now I'm going to open those images I just made, the 7 and 8 here, and I'm just going to take 7 and drop it right on top of my thermal autonomy graph from before, and you see that that automatically updated and cropped to the correct extent. And the same with this one. So now that was replaced pretty easily. And now what you should do is look at both the thermal autonomy and how it's changed, the humidity and how it's changed, and also the airflow and how it's changed. And so now we actually need for this to show a little bit more stuff, which is the airflow down there. And I think it's probably best for all these to be on the same page. So I'm going to take this and move it up to here, and this is going to be a little bit of a mess, but I'm going to group those together, move them off to the side, and then so I make sure everything scales together. I'm going to group everything here and then Control Shift and scale it way down so that I can now align things vertically. So I've got my initial run with no ventilation, no heating and cooling, no ventilation, and then I've got a second run here which has the ventilation and no heating and cooling. And you can also see when the outdoor temperature is higher than the indoor temperature, and so no ventilation is occurring here. And I'm going to just outline that area, which kind of occurs through the middle of the day in this zone, more or less through about there. It seems like there's 2 or 3 times that's happening. So now I can create a schedule that where I want for my cooling and heating system to occur. I want it to occur when the ventilation is not occurring. And then I can create a schedule for the ventilation so that occurs. And that's called a mixed mode operation. So I'm going to go back to my IDF editor and browse to my baseline file, not any of the previous ones I was working with, the baseline. And I'm going to save this file as a mixed mode.idf. And now in this file you've already got your HVAC system, and you should probably have a cross ventilation wind system set up if your building has cross ventilation. So you can see, for instance, I've got for Worcester 214 some openings on the west facade and the north facade, and they're scheduled to be always on between when there's an indoor temperature of 23 and an outdoor temperature, indoor temperature between 23 and 25. And I did this primarily so that I wouldn't have the heating coming on when my windows were open. Now that I'm going to customize the schedules, though, I can expand this range. I'm going to have this be 30 degree high and a 22 degree low. I'm going to do the same for this one, 22 and 30. And then I'm going to make sure that they come on, not always on, but on a schedule. So to get that schedule, or to start filling out that schedule, I've made a template for you that you can find on the website. It's called complexschedule.idf. So the best way to do this is go from your IDF editor, file, open, and then navigate to the downloaded file, so complexschedule.idf, and open it. And if you go now to view window tile vertical, you'll get the 2 files next to each other. And this one on the left is the complex schedule one. You'll notice that if I collapse these, there's only one object in the entire file. It's this NatVent schedule. I'm going to copy that object over to my baseline file, which is on the right here. And you notice that this paste object turns on, so I don't have to go to this class. I can just paste it, and it'll automatically paste it into the correct class. You can see it's working on it. It just pasted NatVent schedule into the schedule compact class. Sometimes, this is a little quirk of the IDF editor, it doesn't recognize when you're copying from one file to the other, and it takes a little nudge. And so sometimes if you don't see that paste object, if it's grayed out, you can click on New Object, and usually that will cause it to recognize that there's something to paste. Okay, so we've got the natural ventilation schedule here, and before I forget, I'm going to change my ventilation schedule here for my window from always on to the natural ventilation schedule, which is right there. And I'm going to do that for this window as well, natural ventilation schedule. And if you don't have windows that are operable, then you can approximate this by using what's called an economizer. And the economizer would be traditionally the fans for your HVAC system would come on, but not use the compressor or the coolant or the heating. So you've just got fresh air coming in. And it's a little bit less efficient. Obviously, you're still using a fan, but the fan is not using heating or cooling energy. It's just electricity. So another way of approximating that is by using this exhaust ventilation object, and I can turn this one on to the natural ventilation schedule and use this at 5 air changes per hour. I don't want to use that right now because I've already got my windows, so I'm going to stick with my windows. So back to schedule, we want to create a slightly more complex schedule, and this natural ventilation schedule already has some complexity into it, programmed into it. It says that it's a fraction, so it's going to give you a fraction of the hour, or a fraction of the opening area for from January 1st to April 1st. For all days from midnight to 7 a.m., it's going to be 0, which is going to multiply it by 0, which would result in a ventilation opening of 0. And then it's going to go from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., 1, which would result in a window opening of 1 times whatever your window opening is. In my case, I think it's 3 square meters, so it's going to be 3 square meters. And then from 10 to midnight, 0 again. And actually, if we look at that InDesign file here, we actually want these hours, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., March 15th to May 15th. We want these hours here to be our hours of natural ventilation. So we kind of want to reverse the logic of this schedule here. So to program this, we'd say through March 15th for all days, we don't want any ventilation. So I can just go through, and the easiest way is to program all 3 of these to 0. So we're good. So we'll just get heat during those times. And then through October 1st, now we actually want May 15th here, so I'm going to change this to May 15th for all days. And now we want it from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So I'm going to change 7 to 8 and 22 to 18. And we don't want it from midnight to 8. We do from 8 to 6, or 18. And then we don't want any ventilation from 6 p.m. to midnight, so that'll be 0. So now we've programmed in that first range. For the second range, we want it to be September 1st. I think that you need to type in 0901. I can't remember offhand, actually. And the same thing. Between May and September 1st, we don't want any ventilation. So we're going to set these all to be 0, which they are already set for. And then from September 1st through October 15th, we want for all days until 8 a.m. 0, and then until 16 p.m. or 6 p.m. 18 o'clock we want ventilation, and then until midnight 24 we want 0 again. And then finally, don't forget, you always have to finish at December 31st. So December 31st for all days until, and now we can just put, actually I'll copy this one, until midnight we want 0. Alright, so that is the schedule for natural ventilation that's there. And I might also want to change my heating and cooling schedule accordingly, so that I don't get heating and cooling during the times when I do have my ventilation schedule. Now this gets a little bit, there's a little bit more effort here because the heating and cooling schedule already has a setback, and so this is going to get a little bit complex. So this might be actually easier to use the text editor than the IDF editor. I'm going to save this file and open it in using the text editor here, and going to scroll down to the schedule for school heating and cooling. Lights, occupancy, cooling. So I'm going to take this and the heating and copy them, Control C, and I'm going to go down to my ventilation schedule that I just made. This would be a little bit easier if I have it handy. So I'm going to copy these here, and the first thing you should do is make sure to rename these schedules. If you have two schedules with the same name, the EnergyPlus won't know which one to reference, and you'll have an error. The nice thing about those errors, though, is that they're really easy to understand. It usually just says, hey, you've got two identical names, so rename one of them. I'm going to change this to school heating set point mixed mode schedule. I'm going to change the cooling to cooling mixed mode schedule. And there's a technique here for making sure that you don't forget anything, which is to take your natural ventilation schedule and copy this whole thing, all the dates starting at through March 15th, down to your cooling schedule. And I'm going to make a few spaces here so I know kind of where I've left off. And I'm going to copy that right there. Now, I want for the cooling set point schedule to turn off when the ventilation is, I want the cooling to turn off when the ventilation is on. And so I can use these dates to help me as a guide. So through March 15th for all days until 7 p.m. Or 7 a.m. it's off. It's actually off all day. So what that means is I can forget about this and just use my typical cooling schedule for these times. So I'm going to put a big space here, delete all these guys, and then put another big space for May 15th. And I'm going to take my typical spring schedule here and copy it exactly as it is. So all this stuff, I'm going to copy that right into this space. And instead of through June 30th, I just want to do it through March 15th. So we're good there. And actually, just to make things a little bit simpler here, I'm going to delete this summer design day. We don't need this. We're not referencing it in this particular file. So we're just going to use this weekends and all other days. So those are good. So we're good until March 15th. Then the next set of days is May 15th, and through May 15th for all days until 8 a.m. it's off. The ventilation is off, and then from 8 to 6 p.m. it's on. So we want to reverse that for the cooling, and the way to do that is I'm going to copy my cooling set points here and copy them right into that schedule. So I'm going to make sure that on the weekends instead of just having a setback of 27, I actually now want the schedule to reflect the natural ventilation schedule. And so what I'm going to do is take out these two lines until 24, 27 and use these lines. So until 6 a.m. we're going to have our normal setback of 27, and then between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. instead of cooling the place down to 24, I'm actually going to have an even larger setback. That setback I'm going to put at 31 because I put the natural ventilation schedule on until 30 degrees. So what this means is that the windows will stay open until 30 degrees, and then at 31 degrees the cooling system will turn on. And then at night, when the natural ventilation is no longer available, I'm going to have the air conditioning come on if it's above 27. I hope that made sense. We can talk about this more in class. So we want this to actually happen for all days, not just the weekends. So I'm going to erase this for the weekends line. And now we should have a fairly coherent schedule, I hope, through May 15th. Now we need to make the rest of the schedule for until the summer starts in June 30th, or summer holidays. And so what we want then is the same schedule that we originally set, because now there's no more ventilation. We want this schedule until June 30th. There. Until June 30th. And the spaces matter here. This is code, so make sure they all align. But it's the same schedule as we had before. And we're good until summer break. And then over the summer, the next time the fans we've got mixed mode operation occurs up here in the natural ventilation schedule October 15th through, September 1st through October 15th. And so we need a September 1st and October 15th schedule. So to make that, we can use the same schedule that we used from March 15th to May 15th. This schedule here but we have to change the set points because I think, as I recall, or maybe it was the hours. Yeah, that was the main difference, is not the set points, but the hours during the summer were different. So here's where you could get into some very fine-grained control of trying to program things to be by the hour and so forth. That's a little bit, I mean, if you want to be totally anal about this, we could do this, but I think it's beyond what is really necessary for these runs. There might be a little imprecision here, but I think that won't bias things too much, and if it does, just make note of it. This is probably not going to be perfect. So this should end on September 1st, and we should be good there. The next mixed mode operation period is from September 1st to October 15th. So we can go back to our last mixed mode operation, which is there from May 15th, and copy this down to here, and change this now to October 15th, and oops, we should be good to go. It's good to check over these things, but it looks like that's the right schedule. And then the last one is until December, where we go back to our regular setback schedule, and that is this original schedule, the first schedule we had there. So really alternating schedules between mixed mode and conditioned. So December 31st, and this is back to our original cooling schedule. So now I'm going to erase all of this stuff, which was the remnants of our natural ventilation schedule, and I'm going to erase all this stuff, which is the remnants of our cooling schedule. And this is super, super important. Make sure you've got not a comma, but a semicolon as your last entry there. That's a signal to EnergyPlus that that object is complete. So now we've got a really complex cooling schedule, but the nice thing is the heating schedule should be very easy, because we can take all of this logic and just apply different set points to it. So I'm going to actually, let's see, I'm going to take this and move it down. Actually, I'm going to take this and move it down. And I'm going to notice that my set points are 21 degrees and my setback is 16. And that's consistent throughout. So I'm going to copy my cooling schedule as it is, like that. I'm going to copy it down there. And if I remember right, it's at 21 and 16. So I can go through and change all the 27s to 16 and all of the 24s to 21s. And this should give me my, and all the 31s I want to make to a setback to the natural ventilation. And the low point of natural ventilation, I think, was 22. Let's check that right now. I'm going to open this in IDF editor and go down to my ventilation object. And yeah, it's 22 degrees. So I might make that 21 degrees as a set point. If you feel that that's too cold, then you'd probably want to increase this to 22, and then increase your natural ventilation to 23. So you have a little bit of play in between the two. So then I'm going to set this back to 16, this one to 16, this one to 16, 24 would be 21, and so on and so forth. You can see how this is going to happen, and I think you get the point here. So I'm going to finish doing this on my own. I'll save this as an IDF file, and I'll fast forward. So I finished filling in all those values. I saved this as mixedmode.idf, or it's just save the file. And now I'm going to check it in the IDF editor. It's always a good idea to do this. You can make sure that you double check to make sure everything was filled out right. And it looks like I didn't do everything right. It says object type not recognized through 630. It appears on line through 630, line number 1272. This error may be caused by misspelled object name. Yeah, so this is the danger of working directly in the text editor, is that you may screw things up pretty badly, which looks like what I just did. Getting a slew of error messages. I'm just going to press ESC to get out of that. I'm going to go back to the text editor, and probably the easiest way to look for this error is to do the search through, I think it says through 630, and I'm going to search for that. And there's a few things that could be wrong. It could be that I entered the number wrong, or I didn't put a comma, or I messed up the colon or spaces. That one looks good. I'm going to keep looking. These all look good. Oh, okay. Well, I guess I forgot to erase. When I copied the heating schedule, I forgot to erase this part. So there we go. I'm going to erase that and save again. And let's see if this works any better this time. Opening from the IDF editor. Oh, yay, that was it. So it's always good to read the errors, and it's kind of like a nice friend patting you on the shoulder going, hey, did you forget something? So let's inspect that and make sure I double check to make sure nothing went wrong. The cooling mix mode schedule is here, the heating mix mode schedule is here, and the natural ventilation schedule is here. So they should in some ways mimic each other, March 15th to May 15th. And we've got the setbacks correct for the thermostats. And it's a really long schedule, but I think that this is right. We should double check this on the output. Now, before we hit simulate, it's important to make sure that all the objects are correctly tagged to these schedules. We made 3 schedules. Let's make sure that they're correct. The objects are correct. So let's go first to the ventilation schedule, and for our natural ventilation, we've already put the nat vent schedule on those. For the HVAC system, we haven't yet put this on the new set point thermostat. So we need to navigate down to our mix mode. This is heating mix mode schedule and cooling mix mode schedule. Okay, so that should be good now. I'm going to save this. I'm going to hit simulate, and hopefully we'll get no errors as it goes through. The simulation's done, we got no errors, and so we can take our variables and copy them into the dashboard again. And let's see what we got. So if we go to the year tab here, good. We can see that the schedule is working here, that there is a lot less cooling now during mid-March to mid-May, and there's also a lot less cooling from the end of June until the beginning of October. And that's what we wanted to see. So our natural ventilation is theoretically working well. So let's go over and see how it's actually working here. You can see that, well, first looking at the heat map, of course, when the HVAC systems are on, we're doing great. That's good. No surprise there. When there's no HVAC systems on, like here and here, it is a little warm. And actually, we can see just how warm if we go up here. It's getting up into the low 30s, high 20s, low 30s. That's pretty warm. And One very interesting thing is if you have a lot of air movement, then that will perceptually cool the occupants. So it's not going to change the actual temperature in the space. It would still be the same, 30 degrees or so. But with some, like a ceiling fan or a table fan, you can actually get about 2 degrees worth of comfort out of that, 2 degrees Celsius. And as luck would have it, most of our overheated hours are plus 2 degrees over. And so all this yellow, the light yellow region, we could consider comfortable if we had a ceiling fan or a desk fan next to, or sort of fanning each occupant. I'll show you how to simulate that in just a second. But first, I want to make sure, let's go ahead and export these. Actually, we should also look and make sure that our ventilation airflow is working. It looks like it's doing perfectly. You can see that the windows are opening up during these periods that we programmed in and here, and we're getting a whole lot less ventilation airflow through here. So good. I think everything appears to be working as we programmed it. Give yourselves a pat on the back if you've gotten this far. And now I'm going to print this to PDF, and I will save the images and come back when it's done. The last step here is to add ceiling fans and adjust the schedule, the cooling set points to reflect that increase. So I'm going to go back to my IDF editor and start from my mixed mode model, and I'm going to save this as 25 mixed mode with ceiling fans. And this is relatively simple to do. I'm going to go down to the equipment and add fans by copying my equipment. I'm going to duplicate it and then rename it as ceiling fans. And we want it for zone 1. We're going to want to make a new schedule for this, so we'll hold up on that. Instead of the design level, I'm going to use this as a watts per square meter, and so I'm going to change this to watts per area, and let's use 2 watts per square meter for the ceiling fans. That's relatively typical for a high efficiency ceiling fan. So we've got the power, now we need the time. And the time is going to be defined by the schedule. It's currently set to the equipment schedule, but we need to make a new schedule to account for the ceiling fan use. And actually, probably the best way of visualizing when this schedule should be is to take a look at the original run that we did, probably this one with 5 air changes per hour. And we can see that the fans would be useful anytime that the interior is going to overheat. If you have enough airflow with natural ventilation, then you won't need the fans, but fans also don't use very much energy. So let's just assume, to simplify things, let's just assume the fans are going to run for this entire period. And so from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. from mid-March to November. And so let's make that schedule, and let's see, we can base it off this one here. The night vent schedule is fine, so I'm going to call this ceiling fans schedule, and we wanted it from May 15th to November 1st. Well, actually, it just occurred to me that there's a summer period where no one is there, so we probably don't need to cool this, use those ceiling fans during that period. Well, you guys know how to make that kind of schedule, but let's make this a little bit easier and quicker to do. And actually, I see that the way this is set up, it's not going to be very quick or easy. So I'm going to, instead of using this schedule, I'm going to use the natural ventilation schedule as, let's see if this is a little faster. So I'm going to call this the ceiling fans schedule, and I'm going to delete this one, and we'll start in May 15th for all days from 8 a.m. until 9 p.m. and we're going to want, alright, sorry. So that's all zeros, that's good. So we don't want it during the winter time. From May 15th until September 1st, sorry, November 1st, we want the fans on from 8 o'clock to 9 p.m. like that. And then from November 1st to December 31st, we want them off. So these are already set to off. So all we have to do now is delete these objects down here. So this is going to turn, this is a simple schedule, but it's a little bit faster to go through for this tutorial. You guys can do this in as much detail as you wish. Okay, so that's my ceiling fan schedule. So don't forget to then go back and set your ceiling fans to that schedule. There it is. So we've got the ceiling fan, that'll reflect the energy use the ceiling fans use. The only thing left to do then is to increase the cooling set points accordingly. So we get another 2 degrees Celsius of perceptual cooling from the ceiling fans. So whenever we've got the cooling system on, we can take advantage of those ceiling fans, that air movement, and increase that set point. So we've already got cooling setbacks here until March, and our ceiling fans come on in May. So we're going to skip down here to the May part of the schedule, and from 6 to 9 p.m. we've already got the schedule set to 31. Actually, that's pretty high. I think we did that because of the natural ventilation. So I'm going to keep that as it is there. I think that does reflect pretty nicely where the what the ceiling fans would do. And then if we go down to through June 30th, we can now set back the these days here until from 6 to 9. Instead of having a set point of 24, let's make this a set point of 26 degrees. So that will that's 2 degrees of cooling that we're getting out of it. Now during this period we don't have natural ventilation because the outdoor air is relatively humid. So this is just going to increase air movement inside. And then until September 1st, we've still got this high set point, so we're going to leave it there. And then our ceiling fans go off in November or December 15th. We still have this high set point. So this is all good as shown. So let's see now what the effect of this is. I'm going to save this and simulate it and copy it into the dashboard. Okay, so we've got this simulated. I pasted in the variables into the dashboard. Let's take a look at the data here. You can see in the graph that it doesn't really, it's hard to tell that anything changed. That in fact this bit of air conditioning here did get a little bit smaller, but we only increased the cooling set point by 2 degrees in that range there. I wonder if you can also see Now the equipment use is so small here that you don't really see the increase in equipment use that the fans are using, the ceiling fans that is. And you wouldn't expect to see any difference here in thermal autonomy because during those periods when the cooling system is on, it's going to still be the same. So the biggest differences you'll see is in the overall energy use, and for that the cooling should be slightly less and the equipment should be slightly more. But I hope that brings that across. I'm going to output these and save them or export them as PNGs and then lay them out in InDesign. So here we have the first set of runs on the left, the baseline with no ventilation, where we had an extremely overheated zone, and we were able to see where the periods of higher temperature and lower humidity existed. Then we ran with 5 air change per hour ventilation rates for a constant fan, and we're able to see then how much what the possibility for natural ventilation might be. We also could see that there were times when even with more ventilation, the outside temperature is higher than the inside, and so there wasn't really the possibility of using that. If you wanted it to be cool, you'd need to use air conditioning. So then the last runs, we looked at the energy use and the comfort with ceiling fans and natural ventilation. So on the left you see the mixed mode operation with natural ventilation here, showing heating and cooling use. And then on the right hand side we see the the indoor air temperature relative to the comfort zone, and those periods where we have heating, where we have where we have natural ventilation, where we have cooling, we have more natural ventilation, and then back to heating mode again. And you can also see during those times when the set points are for the thermostat are higher, how it impacts the potential thermal autonomy, and as well as we can see when the airflow is increased because of the windows in this airflow chart. So please lay these out nicely in InDesign and spend some time annotating them so that we can understand these different modes of operation and what the impacts for comfort and energy are.